Hello and welcome. Today we're making a German dish called Bouletten, or Frikadellen. It's also sometimes referred to as the Berlin-style Hamburger. This is sort of a precursor to the hamburger we know in America, and they are super simple and super quick to make, so let's look at what we're going to need today. For our ingredients, we're going to need 1 pound ground beef. 80-20 is generally a perfect one for it, but plus or minus 5% fat is just in that same ideal range. 1 egg, 2/3 cups panko breadcrumbs, I'll explain that in a moment, 2/3 cup medium-ish diced onions, 2 teaspoons minced garlic, 1 teaspoon salt, and 1 teaspoon pepper. A great deal of traditional recipes also use fresh parsley, and some use paprika or mustard to add some background flavor. But since this is a family recipe, we're going to do it that way today, and we'll be omitting those. If you were to use parsley, I would suggest to use 1 to 2 sprigs finely minced. Do watch out, they can burn in the pan and add a little bit of bitter flavor if you end up burning them. For paprika, about a half a teaspoon to a teaspoon depending on your preference. And for mustard, a quarter to a half a teaspoon will add nice background flavor without being a noticeable flavor in there. A quick note about this recipe is that it's adapted to be dairy-free by using panko breadcrumbs, which typically don't contain dairy, as a substitute for the old day-old rolls that are normally called for in these recipes. And the breads are often made with dairy, and in a lot of the recipes they call for those rolls to be soaked in milk. So to minimize the risk of a dairy accident, we're using panko breadcrumbs, which typically don't have any for the bread portion of this. So for our onions, we just want to make a nice medium to medium small dice. I'm doing this a little bit too small here, so make sure you're just a little bigger than I'm using here. I would suggest using your patty size to sort of determine the size of your dice. The smaller the patty, the smaller the dice. So probably about 3 to 5 millimeters total, with 3 of course on the smaller patty end and 5 on the bigger end, or 1/8 to a quarter inch if you're American. I like mine on the large side, so the ones I'm using are actually a little bit bigger than that altogether, just because I like larger onions. Thank you all for watching, liking, and subscribing the videos. It helps the channel grow and makes me and the kitty smile. And if you're not already a subscriber and like this video, subscribe for more like this, and of course, more pictures of the cat overlords. So, for our mixture, we're going to want to start with the egg and get that a little bit spread out and slightly mixed in. This is going to help make sure there are not many, if any, clumps when we add the salt, pepper, and garlic to the mix, because they can clump up if there's too much liquid in one area. We want to make sure both of these get mixed the most and most evenly. Once that's been spread out, we want to add our onion. I like a bit more onion and find the onions escapees to be a part of the meal that I happen to like. I also like mine a little bit bigger on the onions, and I'm using ones that are frankly probably about twice as big as I should. So you want them mixed, but not super mixed, so that you get some pockets of just onion and then other places. So you just kind of work this minimally to get them fully mixed. Once that's mixed in, then we are ready to start adding our breadcrumbs. Now, you're going to want to add about 50% first and give that a mix to see how it is, because you don't want it to get too dry. It should just clump together. And I would add about 20% at a time from there just to make sure, because you can always not add more. You can't take away. You can add more but not take away. So if you add too much, it just ends up being really dry. You want to make it so, as you can see here, it's just going to be clumping together, and that's what we want. Once it looks like that, you are ready to go. Using a spoon, you can grab some of the mix and then gently roll it into a ball and flatten it out without overworking the meat. Typically when you're making them, since I like the smaller form factor, I would use a tablespoon, essentially doubled, to get that amount, as you see here. You can make these bigger and even use them as a hamburger. They do taste quite similar to my mom's homemade hamburgers, and the little onion bits I always liked in hers are here, so if you want a hamburger, it works pretty well for that too. You can even make some nice sliders out of them if you just make them a tiny bit slimmer than what I got going on here with some bread rolls. So, once they have all been made into patties, you want to put them in the pan on just above medium, but not quite medium high in the heat. If you're using a non-stick pan, you're not going to need any oil. The meat will provide its own. If you are using a not non-stick pan, you're probably going to need about a half a tablespoon of oil or so. Now, here's where your cooking time is actually going to change depending on your equipment. I have a flat lid for the pan, so it makes a difference in how fast it cooked, whether that's flat, domed, or no lid. So for example like this, a flat lid, I would recommend about 3 minutes per side, and you'll get about a 160 internal reading on the temperature. With a dome style lid, we need about 15 extra seconds per side, and with no lid, you would need about 30 seconds possibly extra per side. I'd start probing that one a little bit earlier. This is due to the heat radiating upwards away from the pan being reflected back onto the top of the meat, which jumpstarts the cooking and lets us use a lower cook time, saving us a few minutes over the entire cooking, which, while not huge, any time saved when cooking is kind of nice. So, there you have it. You've made a nice, easy German version of what will eventually go on to become the hamburger. This feeds about 4-ish people, depending on the person and how hungry they are. Also, an interesting note on this is, you might find this odd if you're in the States, but leftovers are often served cold with this, sometimes sliced as if like a cold cut or a lunch meat, and on a roll. So it's kind of an interesting thing that they even serve their leftovers of this, just a slight bit different. Not always, but sometimes. Anyhow, as always, thank you all for watching, and I hope you have a great day and a great meal.